My 5-year-old hit his brother really hard on the back one time and left a handprint. Like it was a hard hit. Yeah, he 5-starred him. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're the first person who actually knew that term.
Okay, so let's record the intro now.
So what did Milkless? Because I think we start with the name.
Two dads, we love our kids, but then we also need them to know that we're like pretty cool and it's not like a wimpy podcast. So, hey, hey, Milkless.
Hey, welcome. Hey,
Milkless. Call the audience, Milkless. What's up, Milkless? Max coming at you.
What if that's it? That's our first take. This is part 2 of what was one long, really fantastic conversation with Dr. Tina Payne Bryson. So if you missed the previous episode, back that ass up and check it out.
I'll just tell you one thing I'm consistently hearing from schools and from organizations that work with larger groups of parents and kids, and I'm seeing this in my own microcosm world, is that parents are super anxious. I think parental anxiety is through the roof and kids perceive all of it. And so I think what's happening is kids are getting messaging all the time that the world is scary, that things are bad. And what happens when we get fearful, and we could do a whole other episode on fear-based parenting, is that fear makes us myopic. It makes us really narrowly focused on the thing we're afraid of, and we forget the context of everything else, right? Our nervous system and our nonverbal and verbal information is broadcasting some sort of meaning to our children. Mm-hmm. Just give this example. Your kid falls at the playground. They look at you, and if you're like, oh my gosh, your child will respond totally different if you're like, oh, ouch, that hurt. Let's dust you off, right? So we are meaning makers for our children. Scary as that is, it's really an important kind of thing to hold in our minds. When the pandemic was going, I often was coaching parents and teachers to say, you can give the same demand, wash your hands, but you can do it in a threat-based way or you can do it in a safety-based way. And you can say, wash your hands. There's a lot of germs going on. We don't want anyone getting sick. Or you can say, wash your hands. It's really important that everybody stays healthy. Okay. The demand is the same, but we are creating meaning. And the implicit messaging around that is, I know how to keep us safer. I know how to I'm in charge of everybody being healthy. Like, you don't have to worry versus I'm freaking out. Everybody's getting sick and we can't get sick. Right. So we're broadcasting meaning all the time.
Mm-hmm. How much because Vivek Murthy just released a thing on parental mental health. It's like becoming more and more a topic of conversation.
Yeah.
How much of that do you think is tied to those couple of years of COVID versus how much of that is like a general poor relationship with our devices and too much information and all that? Have you thought about that much?
Yeah, I have. And I actually think that train had left the station before COVID. I think COVID just added fuel to the fire. But I will say, the social media sort of world of parenting, where I think we can also talk about I think women may feel more pressure on certain things around parenting than men do. Like if I really just looked at social media to like guide me for what kind of mom I should be, I would be making like bento boxes with woodland creature sandwiches. And, so I think there's a lot of unrealistic kind of expectation out there. I think parents are way overstimulated. And the devices have a piece of that. And listen, I love technology. I love my devices. We just have to be thoughtful about how we use them. I think parents and kids are chronically sleep deprived. And I think that's a huge contributor to both adult and child mental health. I think it's a huge contributor. And I think that what is asked of parents, like expectations for kids and parents have just consistently gone up and up and up. They even look at like how many hours a week a working mom spends on caregiving and how many hours a working father spends in caregiving. And for both populations, it's like another more than full-time job, right? Like the expectations. So I often think about kids' behavior this way, but it's helpful to think about adults' behavior. So you think about in the course of a day, week, month, year, our capacity is always fluctuating. You haven't had sleep. You and your spouse are fighting about whatever. You've got too many things on your schedule that week, whatever. Or you're like good, right? So your capacity is always adjusting. And the demands of a moment and a day are always adjusting as well too. So if the demands of what's happening in the moment, trying to get your kid out of the bathtub, if your capacity exceeds that demand, you're great. You have a great parenting moment, right? You're batting 1,000. But if the demand of the situation strips your capacity, that's where we fall apart. And that's true for kids too. That's exactly true. And so I think that the demands of modern parenthood outstrip what our human capacity is a lot of the time. And that's why I'm such a huge fan of like, what really matters. Like, let's simplify things. It's all about just relationship. It's all about the 4 S's, helping your kid feel safe, seen, soothed, and secure most of the time. And when not, you repair. And when you mess up, get curious. Like, it's really about delighting in our kids, building relationships with them. And the other thing I'll say is parents have gotten really bad at trusting development. And what I mean by that is most of the things we worry about our kids. Like I tell my kid, hey, I'm going to take you to the movies this afternoon, but we're not going to get popcorn. And he starts pouting, right? And so then I get mad because then he's not being grateful and blah, blah, blah. What I know, though, is that I can provide him with some experiences to help him work on the capacity for gratitude. But anything I worry about my kids, for the most part, is something development will take care of. So people are like, oh my gosh, my kid's biting. I'm worried, or in that moment when my kid's not grateful, he pouts because he's not getting movie popcorn. I can easily be like, no one's going to ever be your friend. No one's ever going to marry you. You'll never get a job and you're going to live in a van down by the river. I can go there really fast, without even awareness. But I think to remember, and you start to get this as you have more kids and as your kids grow up, we put so much pressure on ourselves, but so much of it is stuff development will take care of. If you do nothing differently, if you're not that great of a parent, your child's brain will still continue to develop and they'll still develop better capacity to regulate their anger and control their impulses, et cetera. So we can trust development.
What's hard is like, we know that we talk about that a lot. I mean, you did a social media post that I saw that was like, if people ask, how do I know if I'm a good parent? And you were like, look, if you're asking that question, you are a great parent because just by caring about it and you're providing a loving, safe home, you're good. Like you're going to crush it. With that said, what I think is hard is how do you manage, like we're doing a whole podcast about it. We talk about it for hours a week to make sure, let's go deep into these canals, these little areas of science to learn what the optimal thing is. But then let's just kind of pull back out.
But relax.
And remember that like
chill.
Nothing matters. It's all going to be good. So like, especially in this modern brain of like the amount of information we're processing at all times is so high. This drive for perfection.
Got to optimize those kids.
How do you hold those two things where we want to have all the information on what the current science is about attachment-based parenting? But the problem is that when you pull back out, maybe that's how some parents get into this permissive, like annexation of gentle parenting or attachment-based parenting and turning it into permissive. Because at the end of the day, the love is what matters. But then it's like, no. So you got to kind of keep zooming in, keep zooming out.
Totally.
To not go crazy.
Yeah. And I think the key piece that you're talking about there is intentionality and kind of reflecting. And I actually ask my kids, usually I try and do it around their birthday because that's when I feel like nostalgic around their birthdays and all that. I usually will ask my kids, hey, is there anything I can do as a parent differently that would be better for you? Like, is there anything I'm doing that bugs you or anything that, and usually they're like, no, it's good. They don't usually have an answer for me. But just the fact that I'm asking them lets them know, that's great that I want their input. I want their feedback. I want to have a relationship with them. But here's what I think is super important. I think, yes, be informed, be intentional, but remember this too. Every moment is not so precious. It doesn't matter. Like we act like, oh shit, I just told my kid good job. And now they're not going to have a growth mindset. And I think that is what makes us insane and anxious and inadequate. So there is no one moment that is so precious, right? And so it's like, I remember when my kids were little and I'd worry that they didn't eat something for a meal or that day. And I remember my pediatrician was like, look, just don't worry about the little things. Like, are they eating in the course of a week? And I think that's really sort of helpful is to like pull back in those moments. Focus in. Be intentional, learn things. But I think to just say like, whatever happens this week, whatever happens in this moment, like it's over the course of all of it, that's what really matters.
The other thing that has helped me so much with so many of these different things is just getting together with other parents and their kids. Cause like that piece of trusting development where you're extrapolating wildly of like, oh, my 6-year-old's never going to, know how to share in her whole life.
Yeah.
Then you get around other 6-year-olds and you're like, they're kind of all little shitheads about this, aren't they? Okay.
Yeah.
And you get around other parents and you see one of them like, succumb to a moment of frustration, or one of those ridiculous things happens, but instead of succumbing to frustration, you look at each other and you're like, are you seeing this? You kind of get in the stands and you're like, you see how this is hilarious, isn't it? And I think so much of that like pressure cooker that has made parents so anxious is the extent to which we're just like fucking trapped in our houses with our kids and nobody else our age to keep us sane.
Yeah. We really need that kind of connection and community. We really do. And that's one of the things that, came out in that big report that was put out by Vivek, is that, community is actually incredibly regulating. It's so important for us to kind of get that perspective and to commiserate. And I think one of the things that happens is, the second strategy in the whole brain child is called name it to tame it. And it's based on this science that when we accurately name what's happening and how we feel about it, it actually forces our brain to move into more states of integration. And it shows that our brains are less reactive. And this is why when this stuff happens, we want to talk, we want to talk about it. And it's so important that we show up for each other.
Love it.
Cool.
I have a quick little side question just to kind of maybe close out discipline here,
which we didn't really talk about.
Is that even what we talked? It was great.
We got a little bit in there, just like with the 4 S's, the bathtub was great. Yeah. I mean, some of the other stuff that you will say in your books is like connect before redirect. Yeah. And Matt kind of helped me with that, like, reestablishing the connection. I can see, you're having a hard time right now. All that stuff is so great because you kind of already have the built-in penalty in the sense that they know that they did something shitty and they feel bad about it. You don't need to rub their nose in it. Yep. What if they don't? So what if it's something like, so I love it for big stuff. What about minor behavioral corrections? Like they're kind of teasing, like a little minor tease when you're not looking, they kind of knock over their siblings' little stuffed animal tower that it's not a huge deal. It's like, do you kind of let some of that stuff go? But it's like, hey, why'd you do that? But you kind of saw it out of the corner of your eye. And it's like, they're just being a little shitty to kind of like mess with it. I've pulled them over to the side and it's like, hey, bud, how do you think that felt for so-and-so? Like, I don't think that's, what are our thoughts here? And we'll talk about it. But it's kind of like, it doesn't have the intrinsic social shame that I'm not putting on them. But when they do something really bad, they want to change. Yeah. What if they don't want to change? It's like, that was kind of fun getting a rise out of my sibling.
Well, first of all, development will unfold and they will, they'll have more capacity for empathy and those kinds of things later. I love this question. And it really takes us back to the whole framework. I really think that most of what we do in the name of discipline is counterproductive and ineffective. So let's start with, what is the whole point of discipline? Why even do it? Why even address behaviors ever? Well, the ultimate goal is for our kids to become self-disciplined so that they don't knock over somebody's something when no one's looking, right? So eventually they grow up to make good choices and all of those things, right? The way we get them there is through lots and lots of teaching. So lots of times, we think about like, what do I do to my kid? They just did something bad. Like, what punishment should I give them or what consequence should I throw out? But we have to really ask the question, like, what is it I want them to learn and how do I teach that? And so the way that they learn these skills, like to me, discipline is all about teaching and skill building so that let me say it this way. The way I respond to any misbehavior should make it more likely my kid doesn't do it that way the next time. Mm-hmm. So if you're like, go to your room and then you never talk about it, that's probably not going to give them any skill building to do it better the next time,
it's
right?
Just punitive,
so it's just punitive. So like my 5-year-old hit his brother really hard on the back one time and left a handprint. Like it was a hard hit. Yeah, he 5-starred him. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're the first person who actually knew that term. Yeah. So I was like, he came in, he's like, Mom, JP 5-starred me. And I was like, what does that mean? And so I lifted up Luke's shirt and JP's hand was on his back. Mm-hmm. So I actually took a picture of it. First, I comfort Luke. And I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, just go deal with that beast, So I say, let me go talk to JP. So Luke goes to his room. So now it's just JP and me. And now's the discipline moment, right? He hit his brother. He's not supposed to. And because my job is to protect my young, somebody just harmed my young, even though it was also my young. So I get worked, like I get mad, right? So that activates my threat circuitry. So I have to really remember.
I get mad when my kids hurt themselves.
Yeah.
Like, nobody hurts my son.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So here's the discipline moment. Now, the things I could do, go to your room. You clearly can't be with people today. I'm taking away your play date. So now I'm just making up something that's kind of tied to it, but it's like something I'm just coming up with. Now, if he goes to his room and I've taken away his play date, what's going to happen is he's not going to sit in his room at 5 and say, you know what? I really should have made a different choice there. And here are the things I'm going to do to regulate my anger in the future. That's not what happens. He goes to his room and he is ruminating on what Luke did to him that led to that moment that I don't know about, and how mean I am that I love Luke more and did this to him. Mm-hmm. So 0 reflection. So in that moment, I start with connect first. Because I'm moving his brain. The brain is either in a receptive state, ready to learn, which is what discipline is all about, or it's in a reactive state, not ready to learn. So I come around the corner. He's red. His jaw is clenched. He's like breathing like a dragon. And I'm like, oh, he is not ready to learn. So that's the first question. Is he ready to learn? No. Mm-hmm. Am I ready to teach? Am I regulated? Okay, I've got this. I'm ready to teach. And now, if the answer is no to either of those, it's not the right time. Either we need to get regulated or they do, or both. Okay. Same thing with siblings. If one or both of them is in a reactive state, that's not the time to be like, hey, how do you think, can you tell your sister you're sorry? Because they'll be like, I wish I had 10-starred you, right? They can't act with empathy when they're in that state. Mm-hmm. So I come around the corner and I go, oh, JP, you're so mad. What happened, honey? Come here. Because I also know that if he were physically hurt, that's what I would do. I'd be like, oh, honey, you're hurt. Like, what happened? And the part of the brain that registers physical pain, also the same kind of firing is happening with emotional pain. So I kind of have to like tell myself, like, it's bad behavior, but he is in distress right now. So he starts to tell me, and really Luke had done something pretty shitty to him, right? Mm-hmm. And he's like, I tried to use my words, but he made fun of me, so I 5-starred him. And so he was kind of like, again, I would have 10 if I, had have gotten the other hand on him. So I immediately am wanting to move him from reactive to receptive in the name of discipline, teaching. So I say, yeah, that would have made me so mad too. Of course you got angry, and it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to hurt Luke. Now, here's the key. This is back to what you were saying, Max. He actually, once I get him out of that reactive, flip your lid state, he is naturally going to feel bad about it. Now we'll talk about what happens if he doesn't. Mm-hmm. So I go, hey, JP, you really hurt Luke. And I actually showed him the picture. Mm-hmm. And when I did that, his face dropped, his eyes dropped, he got really quiet. And I said, JP, that feeling you're having right now is such a superpower. Now, what I know is that we had to live in groups, in tribes, in order to survive all the scary beasts in the world, right? Mm-hmm. If you got ousted from your group, you were going to get eaten. This natural conscience, where we feel this healthy guilt, is one of the most powerful things that changes our behavior, because it's a really unpleasant feeling. And the nervous system's like, don't feel that again. Mm-hmm. So that's a huge, powerful thing that we miss out on when we throw a consequence or we just yell at them, because then they feel like they are the victims.
Yeah. Like healthy guilt can't be externally imposed, because then it feels like shaming. Exactly. And the defensiveness immediately goes up. Yeah. That's really interesting.
So I say and I said, that feeling you have, it's a superpower. What an incredible feeling. When you have that feeling, that is your brain and body saying that was not the right thing to do. And if you listen to that voice, you're going to make the best choices. What an amazing thing that you have that superpower. We also have another superpower that's really cool here, JP, and that is that we always forgive each other and we can't lose each other's love. So you can go make things right with Luke when you're ready. So we do that. And then I say, hey, listen, not okay to hurt Luke. So what can you do the next time you feel really angry? So we talked about what he could do. So at the end of that interaction, I didn't send him to his room, but he had a lot of reflection, and I did a ton of teaching. So I did my job. Did I teach? Yes. Did I do something to help him build skills for the future to make it less likely he'll do that as development unfolds? Yes. So I've done a great job being a disciplinarian in that moment.
The key there that I fuck up all the time is the waiting. Sometimes like, oh, wait. Oh, I think we're good. We're both, ready to receive maybe they're not.
Yeah.
Maybe I've calmed down. They're not. Sometimes it's the next day. And that's what's so hard. It's like, you don't want to harsh somebody's mellow.
Yeah.
And like, we're having fun now. And now everybody's happy again. But sometimes that needs to get brought back up.
Absolutely.
And talked about. And it's like, and that's when it goes as simple as you said.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it doesn't go simple that way because I try to do it too soon.
Yeah.
And it's like, are we calm? Do you see what you did? And they're like, yeah, he effing deserved it or whatever. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I want to give everybody permission to not respond in the moment. Mm-hmm. It is wrong. We have it wrong. This is based on outdated research that was done mostly on animals in the 50s and the whole operant conditioning behavioral movement, that we have to respond to this behavior right then or they won't learn. That's not even true of 2-year-olds. It's true of your dog, but it's not even true of 2-year-olds. You can, after a nap and a snack, you can go back and say, let's tell the story about what happened earlier when you threw your shoe at mommy's face. So we can always go back. And I think, again, like in the context of your kids knowing, we move on, we forgive, and we get back on track. We can move into back connection. It's not that big of a deal to bring it back up. I think we don't have, let me say it this way. If my husband wanted to talk to me and address every one of my behaviors that bothers him or that he doesn't like, I would kill him. I would hate him. We don't, like, they're going to give you a million opportunities in the course of a day and a week, a behavior that's not probably optimal. You don't have to address every single one. Keep in mind, the goal of this is to become self-disciplined. And sometimes it doesn't require a full reflective dialogue. Sometimes you see your kid do something kind of a little shitty and you just look at him and you're like, dude, really?
Yeah.
And that's all it takes is you're like, I saw that.
We use dude a lot. Dude is a good, and I've even switched it recently, even though I have 2 daughters. So I'll just go like, bro.
And
they know what that means.
Exactly.
Well, that's what I do about the teasing. If I see it out of the corner of my eye, I'll just like give them a wink. I'll be like, yeah, I see what you're doing.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So that's great. And I'll say this, that when kids don't seem to care, sometimes they actually do in their posturing. They're trying to act like it's all good. The other thing I'll see is that kids who are very bright cognitively, sometimes development isn't synchronous. So kids who are really bright developmentally, particularly in the first 12 years, sometimes are a little bit slower to develop their social and emotional stuff. So we kind of expect too much of them in terms of the emotional stuff. But I see a lot that kids who are very bright, often when you try to talk to them about their behavior, they get really upset and they don't want to talk about it. And that's okay. What we can say to them is, if you start talking about it and they get really upset, you can say, you know what? I can tell you've already done some thinking about this, and that's great. I'm glad you're reflecting on it. And you leave it to them. And because they are thinking about it. If they don't seem to care, then it's probably pretty small anyway. And you can just let them know, like, not cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is a consequence. That is a kind of addressing the behavior.
This episode is brought to you by Milkless, by Matt and me. Max, we're making this for you. We're self-sponsored. We don't want anything from you other than this one small ask. Can you send this podcast to a friend or someone you think might enjoy it? Now, when you suggest that they listen to it, you must qualify it, because if you tried to send me a parenting podcast that, hey, you got to listen to this parenting podcast, I tell you to go fuck yourself. So you need some qualifier in there to let them know, why do you listen? Why do you like Milkless?
I tell you what, my aunt, who's a therapist, just shared it with like a group of 8,000 therapists, because somebody posted a question looking for, so, that's your bar. If you can just share it with like 8,000 or 9,000 people, that'd be a big help for us.
That'd be great. Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. This is something that I've struggled with knowing if I'm handling it well. So, we talk a lot about making sure that the consequence makes sense and is related to whatever happened.
Yep.
There are times when, particularly, we'll sometimes get in stretches with my 6-year-old where it's just like, oh man, we're just having a lot of fights this week. Like, that's just what's going on this week, is we're having a lot of fights. And there have been times when I've, like, that stuff that is totally interpersonal, where it's not like you broke a bowl, or you, like, where there's not an obvious, like, you didn't wear your jacket, so you're cold, where the behavior was like, you talked to me in a way that made me feel really horrible.
Yeah.
I will sometimes reach for the consequence of like, those, like, talking to the people you love in that way is going to impact your relationship with them.
Yeah.
And it's going to at least temporarily hurt your relationship with them. But like, I also want them to feel like you're not going to do anything that's going to break your relationship with me ever.
Yeah.
So I feel this like discomfort in reaching for like a negative impact on the relationship as a natural consequence. But sometimes that's like the only thing I can think of is like, if you keep talking to me like that, I'm going to be pissed at you and we're not going to have a fun week together.
Yeah. So I would say, for one, we never want our children to feel like they are responsible for our emotions, right? Or that they're like our therapist, or they're in charge of making sure we're happy. Like, we don't want them to feel that. And there are natural consequences in relationships for how you interact with each other. So I would say the first thing, I always love to think like, how can we prevent that from happening? Like, how do we move, upriver here? And that is when you're like, oh, we're having one of those weeks. Usually the way that we get things back on track and not have that week is through play, following your child's lead and just playing with them, or just doing something super fun and joyful just for the sake of fun. Like, let's go on a walk with flashlights and see if we can spot any wildlife. Like 15 minutes. Yeah. So having 15 minutes of like one-on-one time that is delightful and joyful, a lot of times that actually kind of is so important to kind of prevent that. Usually when kids are on edge like that and they're coming at us a lot, it usually means something's stressing them out. And the antidote to that is connection, is joyful connection. So I think that's one thing to think about. The other thing is, and I get asked this question all the time. Let's say your 6-year-old's like, you're so mean and I hate you and you're stupid. And they're like coming at you, right? Verbally abusive, which often happens when you pick them up from school. They've held it together all day and they get in your car and they are verbally abusive. In those moments when they're kind of treating us poorly, behavior is communication. And so we want to get really curious, like what is really happening for her? Is she really tired? Is she coming down with something? Maybe she's going through a growth spurt. We want to try and get curious. But then I would say in those moments, and I'll say this about lots of things, there's no one good way to be a parent. There's not one, here's how you should handle that, Matt. Like, here are 3 different ways. One is to know she doesn't usually talk to me this way. There's something going on with her. She's not her best self. So I'm going to co-regulate. I'm going to be like, oh, sweetie, you seem like she's coming at you, but you're like, it seems like you're having a hard day. What do you need? How can I help? Right? So you just go that route. You go nurture. Or you say, stop. I don't let anybody talk to me like that. And I'm happy to like shift gears. We can do something else, or I will listen if you want to talk and change the way you're talking to me. But we're not continuing this this way. So you can set the boundary. That's perfectly fine too. Or you can just say, you know what? I need a break. And you just go walk away, right? Run away.
Maybe some of the distinction too is like, rather than telling them what they need to do, it's like, here's what I'm going to do.
Exactly.
Like, if you're talking to me that way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go outside. Like, I can't, like, if we keep doing this, I'm going to get frustrated. I don't want to do that.
And Matt, I would say a couple things. One is, there is so much power in responding to her irritability or her kind of not being great in that moment with like equanimity. Like, this is not going to, I love Janet Lansbury uses the term unruffled. You're kind of not ruffled by it. You don't take it personally. And you actually sit in curiosity. And honestly, the power of the word is a lot. So you can just literally like look at her and be like, you don't seem quite like yourself.
Yeah.
Are you okay? What's going on, sweetie? And usually like if you open it up like that, like sometimes they'll just tell you like, I'm really mad about blah, 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 or I'm so sad. And they'll share what's going on. So I would increase connection, increase joy, increase play, and then approach with curiosity in that moment. Honestly, your kid, like one of my 3 kids, whenever he acted like that, I knew it was a blood sugar issue.
Yeah.
And he was so oppositional. Like if I was like, you need a snack, he would refuse to eat for hours.
Yeah.
And so what I learned to do was not say a word and just set food down in front of him. And then he would like eat it. And 10 minutes later, he'd be a nice kid again. So I think just being really curious about what's really going on underneath the behavior. And then saying like, I'm unruffled by this, but it's also okay to say, you know what, when you say that hurts my feelings. I don't like that. I like having fun with you. And I like when we're having a good time together. And when you do that, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
So you just literally are addressing the impact on the relationship directly.
Yeah. Rather than speaking about it in this more meta way, that's probably over her head anyways. Yeah. I have I've done well with the like best defense is a good offense, like find a time to go play. Man, it was funny. You were saying flashlights at night. We saw a ring-tailed cat like 2 weeks ago in the middle of a rough stretch. And it was like amazing because they're super rare and it was super cool. I think the curiosity is the thing that I probably don't do enough of. And it's tough because when I go to the like, man, it really seems like you're having a hard time. I get the like, no, I'm not. It's that you're a dick.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't use those words exactly and shit up, but like they're like, there's an immediate redirect towards like the way I'm talking to you is because you.
Yeah.
And then we get into this thing that's not particularly productive. So yeah, that coming from a place of curiosity and then really focusing on like, here's what I'm going to do and what I can do rather than like, you need to stop doing this.
Yeah. And you can disrupt the moment too. You know, you can be like, you know what, this isn't really going anywhere fun right now. Let's go do something else. And then you're like, you know, let's go outside or let's go, you know, I've got this new thing. I'm trying to figure out how to make it work. Like you can probably figure it out. You can solve it. But shifting it or just putting on music and being really silly and playful. Pick up an accent and start walking with a limp and pretend you're someone else. Like just shift that moment. And then you can always come back to it and be like, hey, I'm just checking on you earlier. I just want to make sure we're good. Or like, did you have something you wanted to talk about? Because I know like there were with my kid who was more oppositional. He was one of those very controlled, cool anger kind of kids. Like, instead of like slamming chairs over when he would tantrum, he would slowly grab the chairs and lower them slowly with eye contact to me, like with eye contact. And he's an incredibly amazing kid, who is brilliant and just the best human being, truly. But when he was a kid, he had this controlled anger. And one of the things he would do is he was very strategic in calling me on my own stuff. Like he'd be like, don't try your parenting crap on me. Or he would say things that he knew would hurt. Like he would say like, you just don't spend enough time with me. And I spent so much time with him, but he knew that would hurt me. And so like in that moment, it's so easy to like take the bait and just go at him and just totally freak out. When we have the presence of mind, sometimes in that moment, you know, your kid is just pushing your button in that moment for whatever reason. Like maybe they want connection with you. Maybe they do need more time with you. But in that moment, for me, like the best responses in those moments, I learned the hard way was to say, you know what you just said is really important and I want to think about it. Let's come back and talk about it later. And then I would move on to something else. A couple hours later, I would say, hey, you said this earlier. Can you tell me more about that? And he'd be like, no, I don't really feel like that. I just said that. So then it was like, it would have been for nothing. I would like going and like feel terrible. We would have this battle. So sometimes disrupting the moment is a good option too.
Yeah, that's great.
On the topic of disrupting, I've just had this burning question that it's come up a bunch with, let's say a 4-year-old. They're doing something that like can't be happening. Like, let's say if they're just grumpy at the table and they don't want to eat, fine. Just sit there and be grumpy. Like we've learned to just kind of just be chill. They're not being disruptive.
Yeah.
But what if there's a disruptive situation like slamming the table or flipping the plate?
Destruction of property or people. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I've been doing lately is if I think I do it right is if I'm calm, we say, okay, well, we're going to go chill out somewhere else because I don't want to do a whole connection exercise in front of the whole table.
Yep.
Calmly remove the 3 or 4-year-old.
Yep.
We'll go sit in their room together. It's not like, let's read books and have fun. But I'm also not being passive aggressive and being like, I'm not talking to you in here.
Right.
But I'll just kind of sit in there, chill, and then be like, hey, do you need a hug? Is everything okay? Try to reestablish that connection. Sometimes that takes 5-10 minutes where they don't even want to.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, well, I'll be here till we're ready to jam.
Yeah.
And then once we are ready to jam, usually their own thing comes in online and is like, I'm sorry, I'll eat good.
Yeah.
And then we'll go up. So like
they get back to regulation. You're basically giving them space.
It's cool to like remove them.
Absolutely.
Right? That's cool. Okay.
And I think, so again, that's like when they are full of big emotions and big behaviors, they actually have stress hormones pumping in their bodies. That does not feel good to them. It's really stressful. So when you remove them, you actually are creating a safe haven for them. And you literally then just say it, be like, that was really hard for you to be in charge of your body at the table. That was really hard for you right now.
Yeah.
You just say it. And then you're like, I will help you. And, or let's take a break. And then, you know, and then you're like, let me know when you're ready. So you don't have to have a lot of reactivity. Again, like I think we spend so much energy cognitively, emotionally, physically, trying to figure out how to fix things or how to like whatever. And the truth is we really just can allow them to feel, create a container where they can feel and express that without ruffling us too much, where they feel like they've destroyed something relationally. You were having a hard time. No problem. We're going to take a break. When you're ready, we can go back. Like, nothing has to be a big deal.
What do you buy? Violet Archer.